Okay, folks, welcome aboard. As you know, we decide to come on a few minutes early because there are delays, believe it or not, with regard to our broadcast. So right now it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, and a few other live streaming platforms not on yet. So we thought before we would officially begin our broadcast at 7 p.m., I'd share with you a few things that are very, very important to you in North America, especially to our Canadian friends. And I'll repeat some of this at 7 p.m. to make sure that everyone who is tuning in gets some of this information. To begin with, we got a couple of great guests tonight. You got heroes up there in Canada, and we got another one tonight. Uh, Vincent, and again, folks, I got to tell you, I really mess up last names. Gersi, I'm going to say it, and I hope he corrects me when he comes on, like everybody else has. But Vincent has been really involved deeply in fighting to preserve the freedom and liberties and individual rights of Canadian citizens. So we'll be hearing from him tonight. Ward Connery is going to be on. Now, Ward, an interesting fellow. I recorded his interview with me the other day, again, not realizing that the guys here that helped me out pushed the live button. So we were on live, but we preserved that video interview. And we're going to actually play that a little later. But he's going to be talking about civil rights in America from a totally interesting perspective. How about talking about civil rights, addressing civil rights issues from a conservative perspective? I think you'll find that very interesting. Now, many of you know, if not all of you know, that we did put out a policy paper in the form of an opinion editorial to the press here in America. And then we sent it out to everyone on our mailing list, and we posted a link to it. And that was an absolute direct response to Justin Trudeau's live streaming act, that new online live streaming act that they passed that is certainly, in our view, going to hinder the ability of the people of Canada to speak up and to speak out. We believe that it's very restrictive, and we believe that it's time for the United States government to start paying real close attention to what's happening in Canada. Now, right now, you all know that we're busy here in America between a war that is taking place in Ukraine that, frankly, I've said we don't belong there. We're busy with our elections here. We're busy with the Trump indictments and on and on and on and on. A lot of distractions. But I will tell you this, we won't be distracted to the point that we're going to forget you, because we are not going to do that. We're going to be involved in a lot of things here in the United States. I'm going to be going on a unity tour. I'm going to be working with Republican Party individuals across this country, but we're going to still maintain our integrity, if you will, regarding all of you. Now, with regard to that online streaming act, we did a comparative analysis between that bill that the Canadian Parliament has passed and the broadcasting requirements of the Chinese Communist Party. And we put some of the comparative analysis in the paper that we published, and it was absolutely stunning, folks. Absolutely stunning how closely aligned the new Canadian Parliament Live Streaming Act is with the playbook that actually comes out of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, you would think that there would be some effort to hide some of the requirements, especially when it comes to Canadian content. Now, what's that all about, folks? Imagine Canadian content. Well, we know what that's all about because it's explained in the Communist Chinese Party playbook. That means we, the government, will approve of what communications you will receive and what communications you will transmit. Incredible. But more on that some other time. In fact, I'll probably talk to Vince about that a little later. But we certainly plan to pursue this particular issue, among others. Now, the SOS letters, they're coming in. We're still asking all of you, not only in Canada, but around this planet, to send them to us. We got a good amount now, but we need a lot more. And I'm not giving numbers out because I know that the people who are opposed to what we're doing, which is to secure freedom and liberty around the world, to protect U.S. national security by addressing the issues that are surfacing in Canada, I don't want them to know how many we have, but they will find out how many we have when we do what we're going to do with them. I talked to you about the presidential campaign here in America. We're going to be full steam ahead with that. and we got a lot more to do. Well, I'm going to now invite our guest, our distinguished guest, and I'll tell you, he's worked so hard, and I'm so happy that he's here with us tonight. Vincent, thanks for joining us.
So good to be here. Thanks so much, Lieutenant Rogers.
You're welcome. Vince, for the sake of our global audience, would you be kind enough to share a little bit about your background and what you have done with the National Citizens Inquiry? And then I'd like to talk to you about some specific issues regarding what's going on in Canada today.
Sure. So my background was a law enforcement officer in the province of Ontario with Ontario's largest police service, the Ontario Provincial Police. I left that service a number of years ago. I had dedicated 32 years to law enforcement. And of course, when things started to unravel 3 years ago, I very quickly saw a lot of deception taking place. I saw a lot of collusion in operation between our media, our government, and corporations all seeming to work together. So it's been a very interesting 3 years for all of us in all the nations across the world. But certainly as things seem to be getting back to some degree of normality, we can't forget the number of careers and profiles and people's reputations that have been ruined over the last 3 years that we're fighting this fight, and rightfully so, I must say. So in Canada, we developed something called the National Citizens Inquiry, which rolled out about 2 months ago, and it had traveled as a moving inquiry. It traveled its way across the entire country of Canada, giving Canadians the opportunity to make statements to the inquiry, both layman statements, victim statements, and personal statements from people in law enforcement, media, and so on. And it's very, very interesting, the number of statements in the hundreds that were obtained from all of the victims, and the information that was provided gives a very, very clear snapshot, a very clear picture of what was going on in Canada. And this isn't something people have imagined. This is actually real. There's been a lot of damage that was done, not from COVID-19, but from our government's response to COVID-19. And a number of things that are now before us, new items that are coming up on a regular basis, all seem to be working against the best interest of Canadians. So I'm very proud to have been a part of the National Citizens Inquiry. I did testify there when it was in the city of Toronto. That's kind of like, for your American audience, Toronto is like Beijing to China, is what Toronto is. It's a very liberal city by mainstream media. So it has traveled across the country. The National Citizens Inquiry has completed its task, and now it's a matter of time before the commissioners who took all the testimony compile the final report, and then we go from there.
Where does the report go? Does it go to your parliament? Does it go to the public, the media? Probably, if not in Canada, we're certainly going to want it here because we will publicize it.
Yeah, so a number of summonses were distributed to our members of parliament and our members of provincial parliament. So our provincial leadership, our federal leadership, our healthcare people within the system. And I will say that none of the people that were subpoenaed had shown up, and mainstream media did not show up to cover this event. Again, it was to be kept very silent because it was very damaging to the government's position. So where does the report go from here? Well, the report will be distributed and made public. It will be a historical reference on a public record so that the world will know exactly what went on here in this country from direct statements taken from those individuals that were victims and those directly involved in the processes as well. But beyond that, we are going to have an election in about a year here as well, and we are hopeful that that report can be integrated into our new leadership that we should see come about, hopefully. And according to the polls, it appears that most Canadians want to see the end of this current regime. in a very high capacity. So we're hoping that the new regime coming in might take this information and make some changes and put us on a different trajectory. We're certainly going in the wrong direction right now.
Vince, I'm glad you brought up the fact that you guys are going to do this and you have an election coming up. It's very important for the Canadian people to know that whether it be the U.S. government or any government, but especially the U.S. government, will not get involved in the internal affairs of a country regarding its government and the people. There are a lot of speculation out there as to what the U.S. government will do, et cetera. Well, one of the reasons why we have you on the air and others is to feed information to the American people, to our lawmakers. And we know full well that our lawmakers, in their very diplomatic way, could send a clear message to Justin Trudeau, as they have to President Xi of the Chinese Communist Party and others. And my point is this: the saviors of Canada are going to be the Canadian people. As we have said to our fellow patriots here in America, the saviors of America are not going to be one politician or political party or in the military. It's going to be the people. And we have seen now in America, things begin to shift. I mean, really shift towards the people. A lot of things going on here, as you know, but we see politically a big shift now coming our way. And that was the result of a few years of hard work and doing this, Vince. And I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this. In convincing the people of the United States of America to get off their rear ends and to go vote, to support candidates that support conservative values in this country. Well, they finally woke up and did that when, Vince, when the policies on the left were beginning to affect their children and grandchildren. And of course, all credit to the moms across America, because they're the ones that raised hell over this and galvanized this country. So can you speak a little to that? I don't know what your polling is or who's voting and not voting in Canada, but I'm just assuming, and if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me, that you have the same problems we have with people just more interested in maybe out in Canada, hockey, here, football, than in the freedom of their children. Vince?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. What we notice is until the fire is lit under you and until the shots are fired coming your way, most people just glue themselves to the couch and we don't see a lot of activity. We did see that with the trucker convoy that took place over a year ago. It's not until the heat gets hot enough that people finally start to react. And things are starting to cool down a bit, so that's a little concerning. But I will say there's a number of new issues that are creeping up. And I'm very proud to see that a substantial number of Canadians are beginning to wake up. They are beginning to realize that it's their voice and the unity of people within our country to come together to say no to whether it's the ideology that is working against us, whether it's decisions that our government's making is certainly going in the wrong direction. We are up and unite and say no. And we're starting to see it is having an effect. It's having an effect in our small communities, and that is creating a ripple effect. So whether it's the issue of gender ideology, the issue of our corrupt government with more Chinese interference, whether it's an issue of wildfires being set in our country, clearly by some form of arson, turning into part of the country burning down, and at the same time our media and government claims that it has something to do with global climate change, which is quite ridiculous, including Bill C-36, which is the gun grab. Our government intends on confiscating a vast majority of the weapons that lawful Canadians currently own. And then there's distraction issues. But Canadians are beginning to see through this, and they're beginning to say, we've had enough and we're not going to tolerate this. And I'm seeing on the more local levels, it is having an impact. It is having an impact where your local councillors, mayors, treasurers, and trustees are starting to listen to the people, because we're starting to form the majority now. We started to get vocal, and it's having an effect.
You know, the Canadian people can't, and I hope they don't lose focus on the fact that they're winning. I've said this all along. That truckers convoy just didn't light a fire in Canada and in America, but it lit a fire worldwide. To see a peaceful protest with the amount of people and the way the Canadian people behaved versus the way the government behaved sent a clear message around the world from the start now that the problem wasn't the people, the problem is the government. And so I hope they don't lose focus on that. Now, Vince, with regard to, well, here's something interesting that I want to bring up. Look, like you, I'm a career law enforcement officer, and it was very troubling for me to see police officers, and we have the videos during the truckers convoy, using excessive force at times, and then a block or two away, smashing the windows on some of the property, trucks of people who walked to the protest. But I want to make one thing clear, and you're in a better position than I am to do this right now. I believe, like here in America, because we do have bad cops here, but I believe the majority of the police officers in the United States and Canada are good people. They've got families, they work hard, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. I just don't believe that the majority of them are in support of the government, but you and I full well know that they're caught in a very, very difficult situation. Could you weigh in on that? Because people need to hear it from a cop like yourself.
Yeah, well, I was just going to make that point, and you started. So, yes, we have the majority of law enforcement officers are good people working in a bad system. That's the problem that we have. And I can tell you without hesitation, one of the reasons the system it has, I'm going to use a very short, simple term, and I call it the yes men. You know, I've known since the beginning of my career, and I've watched it happen over a 32-year period, that those individuals that are very quick to say yes to their command staff without question, who don't ever dare question, who just want to make sure that they entertain their command staff appropriately, they are the individuals that will be slated very quickly for positions of advancement and promotion throughout the system. And those individuals who question authority within management ask questions and just say, why? You know, you're just asking basic, simple questions. That creates a lot of heat, and that will inevitably be an end to your promotional process within your career. You're really not going to go through the advancement processes if you're asking questions. And there's no shortage of issues in emergency management that come up that would need to have questions asked. It's very appropriate for people to ask questions and say, maybe we're not doing the right thing. Maybe we need to discuss this issue, and maybe we need to look at some factors that we may not have considered. And as a result, our promotional process has promoted those yes men who were willing to turn a blind eye and always say yes to the managerial position. And as a result, when these lockdowns came down over the last 3 years, we saw it was more so the orders coming down from command staff to agree with or oblige the officers that were being somewhat heavy-handed and, quite frankly, in violation of their oaths. And this was just unacceptable. So when people ask, how is it that this was possible? How did it happen? I say that this is a very, very integral and important part of the problem that we were facing. People just don't have an opportunity to say no or not take the government's perspective or permission on it. Everybody's just following orders all the way down. At some point, you need to have a fire break where you say, wait a minute, that's not what we're designed to do. We don't operate like that. And I think a good example of that in your country is the sheriff's program, the constitutional sheriff's program as well, where the sheriffs are very aware that those citizens that have elected them and the constitution of your country is your primary law, not what somebody from Washington is telling you to do.
Yeah, you're right. Sheriffs are actually defying governor's orders regarding the Second Amendment. And nothing's being done against the sheriffs because, as you say, they have the constitutional to stand on. But Vince, I'm going to tell you something. What you just articulated is probably the most brilliant and best way of answering this. I mean, that's the first time I heard. You think you've heard it all, but the way you framed it, good cops in a bad system. Man, I'll tell you, you nailed it. I appreciate you doing that. I mean, I really do. Vince, I want to talk to you about the fires. Of course, the Americans weren't paying attention until we started to suffocate. And they're saying, well, where's all this smoke coming from? And all of a sudden they hear, well, it's not from the gunfire 3 miles away. It's from the fires up in Canada. So can you tell us some factual information? How did they start? Were they arson? Was it lightning? To the best of your knowledge, what's going on up there with all these fires?
Okay, so last week I was touring down eastern and southern PA, and when I was down there, I couldn't believe the amount of smoke I was being subjected to, and I thought for sure you've got a local forest fire happening somewhere, and they said, oh no, it's all coming from Canada. I said, Canada? You got to be kidding. It's coming from Canada. I was just up in Canada, and there was no problem there, but I was further west. So when I finally got back from my road trip, I started reviewing the satellite imagery that I saw where these fires were set in Quebec. And I can count 10 to 12 fires that were set in a very large forested portion of southeastern Quebec. And looking at the satellite imagery, the skies were clear, there was no clouds around, the weather was clear and fine. And somewhere between 10 and 12 fires broke out over a very large area, all within 10 minutes of each other. That is just impossible to happen in nature, absolutely impossible. So there's no doubt in my mind this was an arson. And we've had tremendous amount of wildfires happening out in Western Canada in the province of Alberta. And a number of people have already been arrested and charged with arson in relation to those fires. So there's no question that there's a nefarious agenda rolling out. These fires are all being set across the country and elsewhere around the world. But in Canada, to have this many fires happen in such a short period of time where arson is involved, and our media and listen to our government, federal politicians, say that this was all as a result of global climate change. This is absolutely ludicrous. It's false. And they're using this catastrophic event that's intentionally set to blame global climate alarmism on this issue. And that's just completely false.
Well, you know, when Justin Trudeau made a telephone call to Joe Biden, allegedly, and said, hey, Joe, we got to get together and we've got to address the climate change issue rather expeditiously because we have all these fires. Now here, look at anybody. I think a fifth grader would understand with all these fires, somebody's lighting them. So my question to you is, you may not have the answer. I don't expect that you will, but the question is, what is the motive of those who were starting the fires? Well, let's start with that. Any idea what the motive is?
Well, the motive is very fitting to follow the narrative that we're hearing coming from our government. And it's not just our government, it's a number of governments in the Western nations that are using things like carbon credits, increasing our taxes in Canada by carbon credits, and putting a carbon credit system in place on the monetary side of things, rolling out this agenda that is all being linked to global climate alarmism. And then all of a sudden we have some forest fires that are happening that you can just very easily to the layman point at and say, oh, that's climate related, when in fact those individuals, scientists and otherwise, who wish to have an alternative opinion and voice their concerns that that's not the case, they're all being silenced, and our government won't even discuss the issue. So it's very nefarious. When, if I were looking at this as a criminal element, I would say it's quite obvious when you have individuals in a position directly connected to gain or benefit their position based on their talking points, not covering that issue and using their own issue as an advantage. The timing is just amazing. And now this is very circumstantial, but it is just highly, highly suspect.
Vince, I believe that Justin Trudeau used the word expeditiously to Joe Biden because I believe Justin understands that Joe Biden's going to be out of office, if not sooner or later. There's no way we believe, for the American audience listening, there's no way we believe Joe Biden will be the nominee. We also know that articles of impeachment have been filed. but more so the devastating criminal charges regarding bribery are yet to go public, and we believe they will. So what Justin is witnessing is what happens to individuals who think they're above the law, and just to not understand that, he'll probably be on that list who will be defeated if there's an election or forced to resign. Now, we're getting news I know you guys don't get, but we're getting some news that members of the parliament up there are starting to turn on Trudeau, if not publicly, behind the scenes. And the only reason why a politician turns on a president or a prime minister is they realize that the ship is sinking. They don't want to sink with it. Now, have you heard anything like that going up there?
Well, you brought up the tremendous effect that the Freedom Convoy had a year ago. And I'm going to say, yes, it had an effect. But another thing that had tremendous effect was the government's response to the convoy. So the government's response to that was to violently put the police violently after peaceful protesters and the freezing of a number of people's bank accounts that were peacefully protesting. So Canadians are waking up to watching what's taking place and saying, wait a minute, this is completely off. And so the government itself, whether in your country or in our country, quite often the government is doing things that is in itself bringing attention and waking up people of our country to say, what the heck is going on, just by watching the blunders that they're creating. So it's not even a question of my having to tell people. Yes, there are a lot of people who are asleep, but there still are a lot of people who do use their critical thinking skills and can understand and say, wow, this is just completely wrong. And I don't believe that given the agenda or plan that seems to be rolling out through the World Economic Forum, these aren't the brightest bulbs in the tree that are really running our countries. They're not. And they're making incredible mistakes and just showing how ineffective they are. And it's quite hard to miss. You can't not see it. So it's becoming pretty obvious. Now, on the election side, there was an election in the province of Alberta about 2 weeks ago for the new premier. That would be like a new governor of state in your country. And the person is definitely very supportive of the freedom fighters in this country and making some very serious, strong pushback against the federal government, and now looking to create a coalition, not only between that province, but other neighboring provinces, to say, we're going to push back against the federal government. Let's unite. And we're starting to see that happening. So I see a lot of good news coming.
Well, I'm glad you addressed that, because as we wind down this segment, I was going to ask you that. That's very encouraging. Well, it shows me, Vince, that, and I've said all along, be peaceful, work within the framework of the law, because the law is on the people's side. It may be frustrating at times, but at the end of the day, they lose and the people win. And they're winning because of guys like you. Anything you'd like to say before we sign off?
I think it's really important that people, first and foremost, accept personal responsibility. It's really important that, yeah, we want our national sovereignty and we want our individual sovereignty, but we need to work at that. We definitely need to work at that. Work at being the best that you can be, and work at the best you can to work with your neighbors, with your family, to unite. Uniting is where it's at. And we'll push back and we'll win.
And that would be good advice for my Americans here in the United States. Vince, thanks so much. What an honor to know you, and hopefully we'll be able to chat again. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, folks, talk about heroes. I know I mentioned it, but here's a guy, man, what a low-key nice guy. Huh? I mean, kind of low-key, not excitable, and just telling it like it is. And you got a lot to be proud of up there in Canada. And as Vince articulated, at the end of the day, when we take such an approach, the people win. And guess who loses? Those who are opposed to freedom and liberty. Now, here's what we're going to do, folks, before I bring on Ward Conley, which is a tape, the recorded interview that to some degree I messed up, but you'll find out. I'm going to take a poll. What do you think, folks? You want to participate in a poll? Now, here it goes. I promised somebody I would do this. I know that person is watching. So I'm going to do this. All right. All right. I'm going to do this. All right. So the question is yes or no. Okay. I wear glasses during the day and I run around here and there. But when I'm on national TV here and doing this broadcast, I'm like this. So if you could give me an idea, I promised them that I would ask the audience because you're the guys watching. So the question is, yes with the glasses, okay, or no, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do after you give us that poll, okay, folks. All right. So now, getting back to the issues that Vince had just articulated, I continue to say, and will always say, that the Canadian people have done a superb job in addressing this issue. Don't be distracted from rumors and propaganda. I've got people calling me, and I'm glad they are, or emailing me. Is it true that this is happening? Is it true that that is happening? And we're able to get information to them saying, look, don't believe this. Yes, that's true. Because what's going to happen, folks, is there are agitators out there that are looking to hijack the narrative of the people who are truly interested in fighting for freedom and liberty. I see it every day here in the United States. I can't begin to tell you the hundreds of emails I get, videos, and all kinds of stuff. And I personally can't go through all of them, but I do have a team of 6 people who work with me, and they go through a good number of it. And I'll tell you what, a little over 50% we toss out because it's based on rumor and lies and people wanting to stir up trouble to get us distracted from the narrative that we want to get out. And that narrative is what? Is to fight for freedom and liberty and individual rights and go after the Chinese Communist Party. Go after them, folks. We're going after the leaders in this country, in Canada, and in other countries of the world that are fighting against our individual rights and freedoms. So once again, before we go to our next guest, yes or no, please let me know. I'm only doing this because I promised somebody I would do it, and I always keep my word. Okay, yes on, no off, yes or no on. Now, folks, one other thing. I want to get to something here, and this is important. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. Now, folks, this little scroll down there. I don't like doing this, but more and more I see where our expenses are growing. I've always said, pay your bills first, take care of your family. But we are in a situation here where we have done so much work and doing so much work, unexpected work, that, we have to meet our bills, right? We are trying to get some new software for our studio here. We want to stay on the air. We don't want to go anywhere. And we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that a lot of people are not aware of. We're not going to tip our hand publicly. But if you could be so kind enough to consider sending us a contribution. Now, we do, you go to our website there, it's thepatriotdesk.com to donate. Now, that'll send you to, I believe, a platform where you could use your credit card. Now, we do have, we are, available on PayPal. We're back with PayPal because they have agreed to eliminate, from what I understand, some of the restrictions they had. So we're back on PayPal. If you need the PayPal link, just email us, okay? And we'll make sure we'll get it to you. Or I think there's a little get thing up here, a little QR code. I think if you take that picture with your camera, that may take you to the PayPal. I'm not quite sure. But we got good people working very hard. So again, if you get, and look, we're not looking for $1 million, folks. We're looking just enough money to pay these bills and to make sure we're staying on the air, because it's so important now that we're on the air. You have live streaming broadcasting up in Canada. Shadow Davis is one, and I believe there's a few others. So we're going to be it, folks. We're going to be the way you're going to get the truth and the way you're going to get real news with facts. So please keep that in mind. That's thepatriotdesk.com. Now let's get to our next guest. Now, folks, with our next guest, he was so kind. He actually used his phone because he had an issue with his computer. So if you see him getting out of view a little bit, please bear with us. And but what he has to say, I know, to the American public is very, very important. And I believe the Canadian people will find that in this individual's perspective regarding civil rights is rather fascinating. And then when we're done with that interview, I'll be back with you. So here we go with our Ward Connolly. Pleasure to have another great guest on our broadcast, and it's a new friend of ours, Ward Connolly. Ward, I probably messed up your last name, so please forgive me. I have a habit of doing that with a lot of people.
Just stick an R in there and you'll be all right.
Great, thanks. So Ward, for the benefit of our audience, we have a global audience. Would you be kind enough to share pretty much who you are and what you're doing with regard to a lot of the challenges that we have here in the United States and around the world today?
The best way to describe Connolly, I guess, is to say that I was born in Louisiana in 1939 during the days of Jim Crow. I am a bright, brown-skinned guy. My country calls me an African American, a man of color. My enemies call me worse than that. But on my birth certificate, there was a C. That C was for colored. And as a colored guy, my ancestors were black, white, Native American, Choctaw. And I had the misfortune of my mother dying when I was 4 years old. My mother and father had divorced when I was 2. The Louisiana Supreme Court decided to put me in the custody of my maternal grandmother because they did not think that my father was suitable. My biological father was suitable to be my parent, my custodian, rather. And we, along with many other colored people, transferred from Louisiana into Bremerton, Washington in 1945, after the court had turned me over to the maternal side of my life. And we stayed there for 2 years, moved to California in 1940, late 46, always in search of greater freedom. My family was a very independent family. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, had owned a restaurant. And my Uncle James, who was the husband of one of my aunts, loved to hunt. We didn't know anything about the Second Amendment, but you tried to take his gun away and you were going to have problems on your hands. But he loved to hunt, moved to California, and I've been in California from 46, late 46, until 2017, at which time I moved to Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, in search of a liberty state, in search of more freedom myself. But while in California, I had played a very active role in politics and become a very close friend of Pete Wilson, who became governor. And then he inflicted on me a 12-year sentence as a regent of the University of California. And during that sentence, which was public service without compensation, I became familiar with affirmative action. And I learned that the university was actually assigning points to applicants. We divided students into food groups, if you will, Steve. There were black, white, Native American, Latino, and Asian. And the Asians and the whites were treated differently by the University of California than the underrepresented minorities. If you were a California resident and you were one of those individuals into one of those underrepresented groups, you could get as many as 1,250 extra points when you applied to the university. which meant that if you were white or Asian, you would need about a 4.2 to be competitively admissible. But if you were an underrepresented minority, you could get in with a 2.8. So that's a C average compared to an A plus average.
Ward, can you please excuse me, can you move to your left a little and we'll get you right. There you go. We're back in the center. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. And I found that to be discriminatory. The university had a policy that we do not discriminate on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, disability. It was a lie. It was a lie. And so I felt that I could not sanction serving an uncompensated position and lying about it. As the fiduciary, it betrayed my responsibility to protect the university from lawsuits. It's a great institution, but it was engaging in some hypocritical activity, all in the pursuit of diversity. And that's when my public life really began, Steve, and I challenged this system. And very shortly, the challenge I began in 1994 as a regent will begin to pay off for the people, because the Supreme Court is now looking at two separate cases, one involving affirmative action, I call it race preferences, at the University of North Carolina, a public institution, and Harvard, a private institution. And the court will hand down its decision before the end of June as to whether the use of race in affirmative action is constitutional. I pray to God they rule in our favor and say it's not, and to reverse the decision they made back in 2003 that it was okay to do as long as you use race as one of many factors and not the only factor. Since that time, I think we've all learned that when you give a bureaucrat the ability to use race as one of many factors, it becomes the factor. And as a result of that, right now, if you are a parent of an Asian student or a white student, and you want to go to a California institution, you better go out and take a second mortgage and send them outside the state, because they're probably not going to be admitted to most institutions in California. We have a lot of community colleges, one within every man, woman, child, dog, cat in the state. We have 22 California State University campuses. We have 10 University of California campuses. A lot of kids work very, very hard to earn their way to UC Berkeley, Los Angeles, San Diego. Those are the jewels in the crown of the university system. Competition is very keen. As I've said, you need a 4.2, which is an A plus, with a lot of extracurricular activities in order to be admitted to one of those. If your kid doesn't get admitted to one of those, then they're going to have to go outside this state. That costs money. So that's what I've been about. And I'm hopeful and praying that the Supreme Court understands the magnitude of what it allowed over the years in the form of affirmative action. Nothing affirmative about it. It's a form of legalized discrimination, which is against the law, but it's practiced nonetheless because people believe that they're doing God's work by admitting more minorities. And I want everybody to be admitted without regard to their color or their ethnic background or their race. And that's what I'm doing.
That's very commendable, Ward. I could tell you, when I joined the military back in the 80s, I actually was a commissioned officer. I saw something fascinating that I did not see in the civilian world, as you just articulated. I did not see in the U.S. military when it came to the officer ranks and even the enlisted ranks, standards get lowered to accommodate minorities. I did not see as you say, the affirmative action issues implemented in order to just fill ranks. But what I saw was the best and brightest come forward, no matter what race, color, or creed, all equally taking the same tests, the same officer boards, and then getting promoted based on your character, based on your talent and your skills. Now, of course, coming back out into the civilian world, I once again see those affirmative action measures being implemented in elementary schools, in school districts, in colleges. So my question to you is this: how do we put an end to this? I mean, I've got to tell you, listen. I have a lot of friends who are minorities, and they're no different than me. I mean, they could do anything I could do. I mean, well, some of them have articulated to me that they consider it an absolute insult that the government would come in and say, well, look, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are. We're just going to give you an opportunity to move forward. And they would say to me, that's not an opportunity to move forward. That's an opportunity to move backward.
Yeah, I agree. Steve, I think that we all know that the Civil Rights Act passed. How long can we endure that? So it's a serious moment for the country, and I hope the Supreme Court comes down on the side of getting rid of race preferences because it's doing so much damage, and I don't see anybody that's benefiting from it other than the bureaucrats who are part of this huge, expensive network of bureaucracy, but I don't see anybody benefiting from it.
Well, Ward, as you said, perhaps, as they say, all roads lead somewhere, but in a case like this, maybe all these roads are going to lead to him who sits in the heavens. And he will be the one that will guide us and bring us back to where we should be. And that's one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ward, it's certainly an honor, and it's a pleasure meeting a new friend. Can we have you back on in the future?
Sure, absolutely. Enjoy being with you.
Well, thank you. God bless you, my friend. Thank you very much.
You too, my friend. Take care.
Thank you. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. We talk about heroes. I always say it. Boy, there's another one. There's another one. Boy, there was a tremendous, wonderful conversation. So, folks, thanks for joining us. And I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers. I'll be back in a moment. All right, folks. So that was Ward, and he had quite an interesting story, didn't he? So these are a lot of issues that we are facing here, of course, in the United States, many in Canada. But I must tell you, folks, over and over again, I know I sound like a broken record, but we're winning this fight. When I say we, I'm talking about those of us in North America. We are winning this fight. Now, just stand by a minute, folks. I'm going to get something. Sometimes they say a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. I didn't plan on this, but stand by. I want to show you something. Today, there's over 1,000 letters from Canadian people, from American people, from people around the world. Just in this one, this is today. So we add this box to the other 20,000 that we have, a little bit over 20,000 now. So you are responding, and things are doing real well. But we're gonna need a lot more. Okay, let me just put this back, folks, so I don't lose it. So of course I'm not going to give out the exact number, but to me that should be an encouragement to all of you who have really, really worked very hard. And many people have said to me in the United States and in Canada, well, there's not much I could do. I don't know what to do. Well, if you're in a situation where you can't write a letter or you can't participate in something where you can't give a contribution, but what you can do is pray. You can pray. And I've always believed that through the power of prayer, we could conquer, we could conquer kings and kingdoms, can we not? If we just read that Bible, folks, I'll tell you what, every single king in that Bible who turned against God and the way he wanted government to be established. And by the way, when you read the Bible, you'll find out that God established governments that would be what? Pleasing to him, and that he would do what? Set the people free. Think about that. Free from sin. And once you're free from sin, you're free from tyranny. And these are the battles that the enemies of freedom and liberty and individual rights, they can't win, folks. They can't win. It sickens them. It sickens them that the people of Canada continue this fight in a peaceful manner. It sickens them, meaning the tyrants of this world, that the people in the United States are continuing this fight, and now we are winning it. So the fact of the matter is that we're on the winning team here. So we're going to continue our Thursday night broadcast. If for some reason we don't come on because we're on the road, I'll let you know. But so far, so good. We're going to be working our schedule around so that we can continue these broadcasts. I'm not going to stop this. Even if we're on the road, maybe we could do something on the road. And more so, I'm more determined to keep this thing going over the response that I received from American citizens over that paper we published. I mean, that was an astonishing response. I didn't expect it because, frankly, with all the problems we have here, I didn't think that the American people were going to focus on what we were sending out to the degree that I now understand. So this is great stuff. So, all right, folks. So I see the polls are coming in, and it looks like the no's have won. So I'm gonna stick this way, folks. But I kept my word. All right, so folks, that's it. So we're gonna a huge. Well, yeah, figures. The person who asked me to do this has a big yes. Probably the only bigger yes that I've ever seen. What a guy. All right, folks. So listen, next week we'll be on with some other great guests. And listen. Don't be discouraged. Easier said than done? Yeah, you bet. But I'm going to tell you what I read this morning, and then I'll sign off, all right? You know, I read something this morning because there are times, believe it or not, that I get a little discouraged. And there are times I say, boy, where are we headed with this? But then I'm reminded, not by man, but by God. And sometimes he leads you to a place to read something. And here's what I read this morning. And please keep this in mind when you are looking at things and sensing things. This is what I read. It said that keep in mind this. Don't let what you sense, don't let what you see, don't let those two things, what you sense and what you see, overcome the faith that you have in God. Astounding. I read that and I said, you know what? I see this. I sense this. But I have enough faith in God, so I say that what I see and what I sense is not going to happen. And that really struck me because, folks, you and me, I'm going to put you and me in the same pile. All of us are being tested today, right to the limit, are we not? I mean, I really believe that. We've talked about this as being a spiritual war. Well, what do you expect in a spiritual war? Well, I think many of us, and at times me too, didn't expect the onslaught that was going to come our way. I'm talking about not physically or mentally or even emotionally. I'm talking about spiritually. And if the forces of evil that are born in hell by Satan himself want to defeat us, number one, he can't, but he can drive us a little bit crazy, can't he? He can drive us distracted here and worried about this, worried about that. So I'm going to ask you to do me another favor. And this involves you all along with God, because I had to do this not once, but a few times because I had to be reminded of something. I want you to look back and I want you to think about all the things you prayed for and how some way, somehow God brought you answers to those prayers. Now, some people may say, but he didn't answer this or answer that, but the non-answer is no answer. It's not a no answer. It's his answer. Thy will be done. So my point is this. Look at his track record. Man, when I look at his track record, I'm embarrassed even to go to him and ask for anything else. I'm embarrassed to even say, Lord, would you take care of this and take care of that? And I actually fight myself doing that. But then I'm reminded that that's exactly what God wants you to do. Exactly. Lean not on the arm of flesh. Lean on him and let him do his work. And he will. For you, I'm talking about. For you. All right, folks. So that's it. So keep us in your prayers. Now, our guide here was able to give us the PayPal thing. So if you'd like to do that, that would be a big help. And that's it, folks. It's an honor to be helping you. We're going to stick with you, not as long as we could, but we're going to stick with you forever, because this is forever together. And we're going to beat the living daylights out of those tyrants, and we're going to beat the living daylights out of the Chinese Communist Party. And we're going to let everyone, at some point in time, I'm going to come to Canada. I want to come to Canada, and I'm going to try maybe after our national elections in November. I want to be able to come there, and I want to just say 3 words with all of you. All of you. In fact, we'll face Washington, D.C., and we'll face your Parliament Hill, and we're all together going to say, let freedom ring. God bless you, folks. Thanks for joining me. Now, I think Shadow Davis is on. Good guy. Make sure you tune in to him. See you next Thursday, if not sooner. God bless you, and have a great week. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers.